Hello, I'm Nakas, and our discussion is going to be on Form Zero, the Unignited Lightsaber. Now, one of the most iconographic images or items associated with Jedi, Sith, um, anyone who's a Force user in Star Wars is the lightsaber. You have the hiss of it turning on, the light, the voom voom sounds it gives you, and it's a fun toy, it's a fun image, it's a fun tool that we talk about. And unfortunately, in our world, we don't got lightsabers. Disney rolled out that new one that rolls out, but we don't exactly have these weapons. And so the question is, what does that mean for us? Well, as with anything in Force realism, you aren't drawing one-to-one conclusions. We're not hovering around speeders. We're not in space. We have cars, and we have guns and knives and swords and bows and our fists. We have all these different. We can't be talking about space stuff because that doesn't exist. So, how does this lend to Form Zero? So, for the forms in lightsaber combat are essentially they're developed around different combat needs. Now you have Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, and so on and so forth. I believe there's 7, um, and every Jedi you see in the novels and in the comic books and the movies, they have sort of their own specialty, and each of the different forms had a different focus. Form 1 was based around the basics. If you go to like a kendo class or a martial arts class or you go LARPing, everyone's going to teach you some basic moves that you need to know. And so, basic body mechanics, basic theories and thoughts behind combat. And it gives you a good building base to really start developing your own style. Form 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, each of those have their own sort of domain. You had duelists who their specialty was one-on-one combat with other lightsaber users. You had people who preferred a more defensive stance, so they could talk more, they could wear their enemy out, or they just didn't like combat. You had a more aggressive stance. You have all these different ways. And you see their evolution in the comic books and everything. Some of the older styles were brought back during the Clone Wars because you had a few Jedi against thousands of robots, and they needed more light. They needed more defense against multiple blasters instead of being one-on-one, fighty. And I'm going to win against this other Sith. No, it's you have 10,000 robots. You need to be efficient, so you don't run out of energy. You need to make sure your lightsaber battery lasts as long as possible. And in all reality, you're just reflecting a bunch of blaster bolts at a bunch of droids while the clones kill them. You see different uses for different forms at different times. But Form Zero, you don't use your lightsaber. In fact, the most aggressive form of Form Zero is sort of the cowboy equivalent, where you push aside your duster jacket and you say, "Hey, I got this gun right here." No words, just sort of, "Hey, I got this right here. Keep talking. We're gonna have a problem." And this, and what we do, what the way I view this is, we need to remember, up until you draw a weapon, it's a conversation. It can be loud, it can be aggressive, it can be dominant, it can take any number of different ways and approach you. And Form Zero reminds us, as long as that lightsaber is unignited, it's still a conversation. Now, I'm not going, a lot of this is about de escalation. I'm not going to teach de escalation. not a lot of tactics, not a lot of the basics around it. Because if you want to learn de-escalation, you should learn it from someone who's certified in teaching. I am not. You should look for someone who specializes in what you want to learn. Police officers, soldiers, Marines, EMTs, therapists, everyone learns a de-escalation that's relevant to their job. And that's what's really important. As a Marine, I learned elements of de-escalation. But the de-escalation is more, I'm telling you not to enter this base. I don't want to shoot you. Let's talk about this. No, please lower your weapon. Let's talk so I don't have to shoot you. Therapist is more, let's talk you back off a cliff. Let's talk to you. Let's bring you back into a place where you can be receptive to other people, and any number of other ways. And this is experience based. It takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of theories, and just takes practice. I'm not going to cover that in a 30-minute video. I do advocate you go and learn some de-escalation from a formal teacher. Your local community center or school may have some educational resources for you. But what does that mean here for us right now? Well, de-escalation focuses around controlling the conversation. Um, the very basics I was taught go something like this. If they're here, you're not allowed to go past it. You should be here. The idea being, just as an example, you're in an argument with someone else. They're screaming at you. You should not be screaming. Screaming escalates the situation. And in general theory, um, we humans do something called bulldogging. This guy's going to do something, then this guy's going to do something equal or greater than. But he's not going to just jump, you know, he's not just going to pull out a gun and shoot you. If you're talking and then you start yelling, he's probably going to start yelling and maybe get up in your face. It's it's a step system. You start off normally talking. You start using more aggressive words. You start to raise your voice. You're actually yelling. You're posturing your body in an aggressive way. You're pushing. You're controlling the space. Then you start throwing fists, or then you're grabbing stuff, and then you're using weapons. And if you think about it in that sort of context, where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's building, um, people have a tendency to start at one level, and they meet your level and go up. That's important, because if you don't raise, they have a tendency to stay here, because we self-justify, right? Yeah, they're yelling at me now. I have to be louder because I need them to hear me, right? And then they're like, oh, they're yelling at me. We're yelling. We're not getting anywhere. I have to now start doing more stuff to them. I have to get in their face because I need them to know something. I need them to know how angry I am and how I want them to stop it. And now they're like, oh, they're getting in my face. Now I want to tell them to stop it. And so what you're seeing there is, that both parties are trying to get to a situation where they're trying to be heard. And that's sort of what I want to discuss with you today. So, remember what I said. As long as the lightsaber, your pistol, your fists, as long as those stay unused and on your hip, it's still a conversation. They can be up in your face, screaming bloody murder. But as long as no one is throwing punches, you can still talk it out. It doesn't mean it's going to end favorably for anyone. Relationships might be ruined. People might get upset. You might get kicked out of the restaurant or whatever's happening, but it's still a conversation. And even if it allows you to step back, calm down, and come at it again from a different angle this time, that's what's important. Because the moment you start throwing fists, it's no longer about whatever topic you had. You could be talking about what was today, the England versus Italy football game, or soccer for the Americans. Um, you could be talking about that and get in a heated argument about player A's performance and how the referee shouldn't have done something, and you can get all the way up to screaming, and the conversation is still about that. The moment you start throwing punches, that's gone. It's about fighting now. Because when you throw that punch, they're now responding to an assault. And now you respond to the assault, and it goes back and forth, and someone's in jail, or knocked out, or worse. But up until that point, even if it was screaming and posturing and pushing, it was still a conversation about England and Italy. But it was starting to lose that focus. And that's something we need to remember. Just because someone is screaming in your face does not mean they aren't listening. It's harder, but there's still a conversation going. Now, do I advocate going and screaming in people's faces to get what you want, or to start a conversation about, the moral dilemma of, green energy, or anything like that? No, don't, please. You start off at a bad spot, it's hard to come back down. Um, so the idea is, again, not a certified teacher, just giving you like a basic rough idea. If they're screaming at you, you're not screaming, you're talking normally. The idea is essentially you stay here until they come down. So they're screaming, you're talking, and they start talking. Okay, now you start using less aggressive language. Now they're using less aggressive language. Now you're just regularly talking about the topic. And the idea is that the same momentum that you give them by rising to their level, you're using that to kind of pull them back down. And it's hard. It really is. People like to stay mad. Just how we are. So, how does this work for us, right? We talk a lot about philosophy. We do a lot of training. A lot of people bring up very, very rough times in their life. We talk about a lot of sensitive topics. I mean, look at the world we live in. There's even, the idea that people are protesting, about people being killed by cops. That's still somehow a discussion that has to happen. We have to talk about COVID-19 and the vaccine and talk to people about that. A lot of these things you think don't need to be talked about, and yet we're still having these conversations, and people get really upset about it. So it's a good skill for us to have, because within forced realism, a lot of our interactions are communications based. You have people who go out and do stuff in the community, but all of our interpersonal stuff happens on Discord, on forums, on Facebook. You can't really escape it. And it's really, really important to kind of remember where you are on that sort of sliding scale of anger, because what happens in a really heated conversation, right? So you're sitting there and you're like, I have this research here, but they're not reading it. So maybe I'm going to throw in a few snarky comments in there about their intelligence or their reading comprehension. Cool. You just went from talking about it to talking about the person. You're inserting rude and unhelpful comments, and so you just went from normally talking about the subject and you went up. Now the other person will naturally start commenting on your comment about them. So they're going to naturally rise to that level. Not everyone, but it's a tendency, right? And then if that doesn't stop and you keep on these, comments, we're going to start seeing people get angry with each other. And that's when, that's where you see like dirty laundries being aired in public or someone's failure in the past is being brought up. And it becomes less a conversation about the original topic and it's more becoming about the people. And so if you view the online discussions, right? Imagine that talking about the other person is where the assaults begin. The moment you are no longer discussing, um, the moral and ethical theories of Mark Hamill, I don't know, and you start talking about how so and so can't read beyond a fourth grade level, you're no longer talking about the subject. You might be using all caps. You might be aggressively typing and not allowing them the space to talk back. You might even be throwing around suspicions or perceptions that cast the other person in an unfavorable light. And that's not helpful. Congratulations, the discussion's gone. It's now you and someone else just taking it out on each other. And what happens is in these spaces, we have other people who chime in, right? And the moderators get involved. And then someone's in trouble, other people are getting into the fight. It's sort of a free for all sometimes. And the reason why I want to discuss this is de escalation. The idea of having an unignited lightsaber doesn't just apply to combat, it applies to politics, it applies to relationships, it applies to conversations, friends, work. Knowing when you are crossing that line from discussing topic A into the people involved, we start to realize how we actually talk. Um, and that's something important. All of us here, we're interesting people. Not many people are into Force realism or Jediism, Sithism, Gray, Jedi, all these different isms, right? We get a lot of stuff thrown our way. Not all of it very friendly, and not all of it very easy to discuss. Not easy to really handle. It's kind of you're at the park and someone's driving by and throws a comment out the window. You can't really talk to a car that's already gone, right? So what I wanted to really focus in on is how we treat each other and why is it important for us to know how to de-escalate these situations? Because what's happening, what can happen specifically, is it can create fractures in our communities. Well, how so? Every community has its own rules, guidelines, behaviors, and social culture. Everyone has this idea of how something should be run. Ask me, I will tell you how anything should be run, but also I'm convinced I'm right because it's worked for me and what I want out of things means nothing to any other organization. My opinion on how things should be run stops where the actual organization's opinions start. So what that means is in a lot of our interconnected communities, we sort of develop fractures where person A got into a conflict, so person B, these two are talking and they get into a huge fight. Now this person got banned from this community, or they're now talking bad stuff about this person all the way over here. And so you have, these other people, talking to this one person. And now they're focusing on the person, not the ideas. This person is also doing the same thing over here, and you have two groups that then go out to their other groups because find me a Jedi or Sith or anyone, anyone on Discord, for that matter, who has one Discord server they're a part of, and I will be surprised, um, you're going to find 20 or 30 groups with this information and this fight. And it's up to the moderators to kind of pull that back, right? But unfortunately, when it gets to the level of a moderator, that's kind of where, the police come in, or you get kicked out of the bar, or that's when you get in trouble. And that's when people start developing new arguments to get upset about, right? And so now they're upset at this person and this person because this person banned them and this person upset them in the first place. And then they go to other groups. So, what does that mean for you? Well, it's quite simple. You need to start reflecting on how you talk to each other. Even if you think you're doing great, you still need to be mindful of where you are in a conversation. When it gets heated, are you talking about the person or the idea? When you're in this discussion, are you attacking the idea's merits? Or are you talking about something else? Are you working with the person to find a solution? Or do you just want it to remain a problem? Moving into other realms, sometimes there isn't an actual solution. And we're just exploring the idea. Understanding that there's no solution needed changes how we approach a conversation. And so the thing about all of this is we are trying to discuss a lot of sensitive topics in our groups, and we have a lot of people who feel very strongly about them. In some cases, you're not going to move them. In some cases, you shouldn't move them. Someone's idea of what life is, it's a closely held idea. Odds are you're not going to change it for a very long time, and usually only dramatic changes in their life can change some of these core beliefs. Knowing what you're talking about, knowing that you're communicating with another person, can go a long way to preventing you from needing to bust out the all caps or bust out the lightsaber and start, taking swings at people. Remember that there's a living, breathing human on the other side of the keyboard. Can help us remember that. We talk about this from the stance of, I always want to bring the conversation a little bit lower. You don't want to take it so low so quickly that they think that you're just blowing them off either. It's if someone is yelling, you don't just want to be chilling. You want to slowly bring the heat down. And from our point of view, it's okay to feel upset. That means you're invested in something. That means you have strong feelings. You have strong reasons behind it. And knowing that other people have these strong feelings, they're not upset at you most of the time. They're focusing on the idea that someone doesn't agree with a fundamental aspect of what they view as the world. Remembering that someone has these ideas and that they're not always upset at you. I want to say no one cares about you, but no, we all care about you. It's the idea is that in a conversation, you're not talking about people. This conversation with people, you're talking about the ideas and that anger, confusion, joy. A lot of this is based around the ideas in the discussion, and they're not aimed at you. Someone who is talking about, abortion. You can believe that their stances are vile. And when you are talking to someone, you might find you're surprised at their beliefs. But you're still talking about the beliefs themselves, not the other person. And we forget and assume that they are We assume a lot of things based off their stances, and allowing people that space to explain themselves and allow them that space to explore the idea with you. That's the thing, explore the idea with you. Uh, I'm personally very much pro-choice. I believe that people should have a say in how their body handles things. Um, and if you are discussing that with me, I'm not trying to tell you what is right or wrong. Don't try and tell someone what is right and wrong. What I am doing, if you approach me on this topic, we're discussing the idea. We're discussing why I believe this, how that works within the world, where that comes from. We're not discussing me. We're discussing my beliefs, which are, strangely enough, separate. By remembering this, by focusing on the topic, even on something so closely so easily heated, on someone's thoughts on that, you have to remember that, and that will help you have to not fight, because we all get emotionally invested in our discussions, and that's great. That helps you know that something's important. We don't get really heated about different flavors of mac and cheese or different types of pasta. We get upset about police brutality. We get upset about COVID-19 and anti-vaxxers. We get upset about these big things. Should the death penalty be here? How should we manage our taxes? What about this tax loophole? What's our political differences between these two countries? Um, should they allow a bar to be opened up over here on this street? Talking about these ideas and focusing on the ideas and how they interplay with people, that's what keeps you grounded, and that's what keeps you from having to really bust out the verbal lightsaber, so to speak. Because what you're doing is you're not crossing that barrier where it's no longer a talk, it's no longer a conversation about the topic, it's now a conversation about the person. And that's kind of where we need to remember that gap. Once you cross that gap, you have to start the conversation all over again, if they're willing to agree with you to talk about it. And that's really what I want you to take away from this. I know it's a lot. It's a little scattered because it's this de-escalation itself takes time, practice, and experience. And again, each kind has its own purpose, and they're not interchangeable always. You don't use the Marine Corps' de-escalation on someone who's having a breakdown. Can't do it. Don't do it. Not smart. But being able to be mindful of how we're discussing these hot button issues. And remember, we're talking about the ideas. And that while the person may hold a belief that is abhorrent to you, understanding where they're coming from goes a lot longer to you understanding the individual and sort of their belief structure. And that's sort of one of the key elements of conversation. You can talk all day about the weather, but you actually start developing understanding of your fellow humans when you understand why they like hot weather, or if they like rainy weather. And you're not going to be able to change someone's view about why they like, a cloudy day, and that they suddenly magically like a sunny day. You're not changing their opinions. You're developing a better understanding. Because, fun tip, being able to crouch topics from someone's understanding helps you communicate better. An aspect of de-escalation is understanding where that person is coming from. You ever wonder why in all the movies when they send in the hostage negotiator and that they're buddy buddy and they're just talking about seemingly random stuff and, oh hey, you want a pizza, you want this, you want this. They're developing a rapport, and they're also understanding some of the motivations behind why they're doing this. The person might be going through financial trouble, or they're just having a really bad day, or they just snapped, or they need medication because of their illness. And that changes the situation by understanding that, yes, you still have the hostages, yes, you still have, the person there with the hostages, but now that you know, oh, he's doing it because he doesn't have health insurance and he needs the money to, you know, pay back his, get cancer treatment, right? Chemotherapy. Understanding that, it doesn't make the situation any less bad. It helps you understand the person and their motivations so you can start talking to them about that. Cool. And just again, in this specific situation, now you have an idea of what they might be wanting, what they might be expecting, what could they actually be willing to talk about, what do they definitely not want to talk about. And so going back to these topics and how they connect you with someone else, that really helps you as an individual when you're communicating with others to start using better phrasing, more targeted information. Um, I work in accounting and finance. I use certain words for accounting and finance, but when I talk to clinical staff, they don't want to hear all my techno chit chat. They don't want to hear all my technical terms. They don't want to hear my acronyms. My alphabet soup of systems and policies and ideas. They want to know in a language they can understand how they're doing financially. Okay. I'm not going to be dropping a whole bunch of things, rate of return and all that wonderful stuff. And I want to say, hey, look, you did this month. I expect you to do this much, this much, this much. And then if we can adjust this and this, we're good. And you talk to someone from a position that they can understand, it communicates your ideas better and it reduces the amount of misunderstandings. Misunderstandings being the leading cause of the verbal altercation. So, again, I'm not saying you have to understand or accept someone else's position. What I am asking is that you understand where they're coming from at the very least. Because you're not, a lot of discussions online, you're not going to change someone's political orientation, you're going to do this or this. What you're going to do is give them information to contextualize things. And sometimes that changes a little bit. You need a lot more development, a lot of discussion, years worth of work in many cases to really change strongly held opinions. But in the meantime, what you're doing is uh, you're helping increase dialogue, which is helping you understand where they're coming from, why they think so. I have a strong issue with understanding parental attachments. My parents treated me one way, and I don't really have a strong emotional connection to parents. But now that you know that, you can understand why I sometimes may struggle commiserating with someone who is happy to go see their parents. I don't feel that. I don't have. It's harder for me to understand that elation. I see people who are like, I'm going to go travel and see my family back in Italy. It's like, okay, okay, I don't get it, but I'm happy for you. But in communicating with me, you know a little bit more about my history, and that I didn't have parents that had strong connections with me in the first place. So you know already. Again, we talked about something that people might not like, that I don't have a strong emotional I may not be responding very well to someone being excited, or I may respond interestingly. But in talking about the idea, you find out that I just didn't have strong attachments with my parents growing up. And that makes me less empathetic. That helps you understand I'm not trying to be rude. It's just hard for me to understand that. I don't get it. And that reduces that misunderstanding. You're not going to change my mind. Sorry. It, I had a childhood. Some things were missed out on. It is what it is. But knowing that little bit from me because you chose to actually discuss the idea with me and where I'm coming from, you have a better idea of how I'm responding. And you know that if you want to talk to me about this topic, you might want to try something different. Like, I have a son. Maybe you can do a role reversal in the discussion. Would I be excited to go see my son? Answer is yes. Um, but knowing that just that little bit of information, asking why'd you respond that way, instead of arguing against me like, you're mean for not being so supportive of this person. Um, and it's a silly conversation, but by asking that question, focusing more on the topic and how I interrelate with it, you learn a little bit about me. And now you can better target your questions, your queries, and your thoughts around how I interact with things and try to um, engage with me from a different aspect or a different angle, like my son. And that's the fun bit. You're learning more about the person. Many of you already know uh, a lot about different beliefs and different ideas. But you're learning more about how that person interfaces with it. And that's what's invaluable here. That's what we really want, because understanding that is key to helping de escalation facilitate itself. If you know a certain person doesn't like this kind of talk or these certain words or discussions, by choosing how we interact about this topic in a space that they're in, we can better manage our expectations for the end result. You don't exactly want to poke the bear um, for either right or wrong reason, but knowing how someone will respond, knowing why they might respond that way, that allows you to better manage the conversation. And that's really important for de escalation. It's kind of like in those first contact movies with aliens. You extend your hand for a handshake, and you've just greatly offended them. Well, if you learn a little bit more, you might understand that you should have done something different. Prevent that misunderstanding, and prevent from having to start from step one. So that's what I want to leave you with. Keeping your lightsaber on your hip means that the conversation is still going, and you're still talking about the topic. Now, be it in real life or on your digital side, as so long as you remain on the topic and you're not talking about the other person or throwing down at the bar, you're still able to always come back to the base discussion. You know people are going to get upset sometimes, and that's okay. You're going to get upset sometimes too, but having people who are interested in de-escalating these conversations because sometimes you're just going to lose it. Sorry, we're humans. Just going to happen. And you might want to rely on that other person to help de-escalate you. I know plenty of people who they get angry when they're talking with their friends, and their friends are the ones doing the de-escalating, and 20 minutes later, it's flip-flopped. And by remembering where you are in a conversation and being able to better manage your expectations and work with the person to talk about these topics, even when they are screaming at you, knowing how to help bring them back down keeps you talking and keeps the conversation flowing. And that's key to working with people. Because if you go through life just starting fights, online or not, you're not going to learn anything. You're just going to either get beaten up verbally or physically, or you're going to beat up a bunch of other people. And that serves you just about as much purpose as you know, you're going to eventually meet your match when it comes to fighting, and that person's going to put you in your place. And but through talking, de-escalating, and managing our expectations and managing our knowledge of people, we can really start to understand more about us as a community and help keep our communities stronger because we're no longer fighting. We're discussing ideas again. Not that we aren't already, but remember, we are an interlaced community. We have tons of people, and I'm in some 50 discords or something, not all force realism, but I take my negativity or my positivity wherever I go. And if someone is upset in one Jedi community, it tends to resonate. It goes and travels, and that we all jump in on that negativity pile and we have fun with it because that's again what we as humans do. So again, what I want you to take away from this is understanding each other, talking, and trying to always walk ourselves down. Um, it's not always a matter of winning the conversation because sometimes the conversation doesn't have an end point. It's a journey and you're just there to learn. So I want you all to look into learning some de-escalation, learning a bit more of FBI hostage negotiator stuff. I want you to learn more about how you, in particular, talk to people, because at the end of the day, that's really going to help not just you but our entire community in doing so. So I want to thank you for sitting here and listening with me, and I hope you have a good day.